Talk 1240.
Hey, good morning, or whatever it is. It's afternoon, morning. Whatever the case may be, I am sleep deprived, and this is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. The show we talk about technology and more. You know, coffee is a wonderful, wonderful thing. I could not survive without it. And fortunately for me, we have a coffee maker which I man dutifully here at here at the station. So there's never a shortage of fresh and what's another word? Free trade brews for us here at Hot News Talk Radio. So if you, like me, are a night owl and you're just now waking up, that's okay, because now I can inform you about all the different technological things which are going on. This show we talk about technology and quite a bit more. Now, you might be familiar with the situation that's going on in St. Louis with the whole, police and the Stingray devices and all the different nonsense that's been going on, and the controversy surrounding the police usage of Stingray over in St. Louis. Well, if you're not, that's okay, because that's why I'm here. You see, over in St. Louis, there's kind of a problem where the police are a bit, shall we say, overzealous in their usage of Stingray devices. Now, what's a Stingray device? Well, a Stingray device is a device which spies on your cell phone, basically. I mean, that's basically what it does. If you want to be more technical about it, it picks up the signal, or rather broadcasts the signal which your cell phone picks up in order to make phone calls, unless you run out of minutes like I have, and it picks up all the different signals that you send out over your phone, because your phone will mistakenly connect to the Stingray device in order to send and receive messages and all that sort of thing. So that's basically what goes on with the Stingray device, is it picks up all sorts of different information which your cell phone puts out. That could be anything from data to SMSs, text messages, to voice communications. Anything your phone puts out over the cell phone carrier waves is what's picked up by the Stingray devices. Now, Stingray is a brand name, kind of like Kleenex. We all know about Kleenex, but it's actually tissues, right? I mean, Kleenex does not equate to tissues. Kleenex is a brand. Not all tissues are Kleenexes, and not all Kleenex products are tissues. And that's sort of what's going on here, where Stingray is just a brand name for cell site simulator. Now, a cell site simulator is basically, it's just a Stingray device. I don't know of any other cell site simulators that are made by any other companies. So they're mostly just evened out, and they say it's Stingray. The Harris Corporation is the company which makes, or corporation, which makes Stingray devices. And it's a very high level contractor with various organizations, both state, federal, and local level, be it county or city, and they contract out these Stingray devices. And very often the cities don't actually own the devices. The police departments don't actually own these devices. Instead, they're actually shipped out on lease. So it's kind of like when you lease a house, you don't actually own the house, but you can use it how you will, but you don't actually own the house. And that's sort of what's happening with Stingray devices, where they use it all they want, but they don't actually own the device itself. And to make things even better, the police departments actually sign a non-disclosure agreement with the Harris Corporation, which is where we start to get into some trouble. And that's what's happening here in St. Louis. So prosecutors are dropping a robbery case to preserve Stingray device secrecy in St. Louis. So on the one hand, you might be saying, well, it's good that this person is going free because he might not be guilty of any crime. This might be just overzealous policing and possibly some what's the word I'm looking for? A prejudice perhaps on the side of the police, which is entirely possible. But the charges are being dropped, meaning that there's not going to be any trial whatsoever. That's kind of a problem, because now that's not really justice, because there's no trial being carried out. It's just, we're not going to try you at all. And that's where the problems start to arise. So prosecutors in St. Louis, Missouri, according to Ars Technica, have seemingly allowed 4 robbery suspects to go free instead of explaining law enforcement's usage of Stingray devices in court proceedings. So you see, they value the secrecy of the usage of these Stingray devices so much that they'll actually drop cases to protect the Harris Corporation. So St. Louis case provides yet another real-world example where prosecutors have preferred to drop charges instead of fully disclose how the devices, also known as cell site simulators, work in the real world. So last year, prosecutors in Baltimore did exactly the same thing during a robbery trial. According to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, the dismissal this month came just one day before a St. Louis police officer was set to be deposed in the robbery case, where 3 men and a woman were accused of stealing from 7 people in September 2013. Now, that's a pretty high-level case because we're talking about 7 victims and 2 potential offenders here. And that's, 4 potential offenders here, 3 men and a woman, and 7 victims. Now, there's not going to be any trial whatsoever because charges have been dropped by the city, and that's simply to protect the Harris Corporation. It seems, anyway, going by the information we have here. Neither the Office of Circuit Attorney Jennifer Joyce nor the Office of Megan Beasley, who's a public defender involved in the case, have immediately responded to any requests for comment from our friends at Ars Technica. The St. Louis Police Department also did not respond to any requests for comment. Well, Lauren Trauger is the spokeswoman for the St. Louis Circuit Attorney's Office, and she wrote to Ars Technica saying, "Please note, despite the perspective of the defense attorney in this matter, the dismissal of the case was not related in any way to any technology used in the investigation." What that's supposed to mean, or what we're supposed to discern from that, is that the Stingray devices being used had nothing at all to do with the case being dropped. Now, is that true? That's what she's saying is true. Does that mean that it actually is? I don't know, because this is just a statement, and it's not like you can trust everything that the police or attorneys will ever say. So we'll just say that that's what she's saying, and it may or may not be the actual case. According to court records, which were provided by the Post-Dispatch, Detective John Anderson told defense attorneys that the cops had used, quote, a proven law enforcement technique, end quote, in order to locate one of these stolen phones and eventually the suspects. So what's a proven law enforcement technique? They don't really want to say what the proven law enforcement technique is. It's just some vague thing where it's a proven law enforcement technique. Well, yeah, so is, talking to witnesses. That's a proven law enforcement technique because people are arrested after witness testimony and all these things. Like, that's proven law enforcement techniques. They're not specifying what technique they used. Anderson refused to elaborate, citing a non-disclosure agreement that he and his agency were bound by. Now, who would they sign a non-disclosure agreement with in order to drop a case in regards to whether or not the prosecution had used a Stingray device at any point in time? Really, they're going to drop the case? That seems a bit extreme. And they're not even going to tell a judge how this had happened. They're not even going to tell the defense attorneys what this proven law enforcement technique was, other than just, it's a proven law enforcement technique and we can't tell you anymore because of a non-disclosure agreement. That sounds rather corrupt, doesn't it? This revelation strongly suggests that the St. Louis Police Department had an agreement along the lines of one which was recently revealed over in Erie in New York City, or not New York City, but in New York State, Erie County in New York State. In that case, a rare unredacted form, which you never ever get, demonstrated the full extent of the FBI's attempt to quash public disclosure of Stingray device information. The most egregious example from the document showed that the FBI would prefer to drop a criminal case in order to protect secrecy surrounding the Stingray. Now, this just goes to show how much they value the Harris Corporation's privacy over what some might consider to be true justice, which would be a criminal being brought to trial, or a potential criminal anyway. You don't know if he's a criminal or not until after the trial proceedings and all that sort of thing, innocent until proven guilty and all that sort of thing. So they would prefer to just drop charges entirely instead of simply go forward with the trial like any other normal trial. But because they're using these Stingray devices in order to capture information, they simply don't want you to know about this so much that they're going to drop the case so that you don't hear about this. Fortunately, it's backfiring. You see, if the FBI does not want you to know about something, then I want you to know about it. I'm not a very big fan of the FBI, and I'm not a militant non-fan of the FBI, and I'll explain why. The FBI and many other law enforcement agencies, and really any agency whatsoever, are so inept and so terrible at doing their jobs that it's really almost not worth getting upset about, because you could just watch them take blunder after blunder in their everyday activities, and it just proves that they really aren't very good at doing what they're supposed to do. We're all worried about, well, what about the tyranny of the police, and what about the tyranny of the FBI and the federal system and all these sorts of things? But really, I'm not too worried because they're not very good at just doing basic everyday activities. I mean, these are guys who need permission to use the bathroom practically. So I'm not too worried about them taking over in some sort of hostile takeover because they can't manage their own books. We have people who cannot manage their own books, and we're supposed to be afraid of them. Frankly, I'm not really afraid of any Fed. I'm not afraid of some sort of tyrannical system that'll come in and suppress us all and put us into FEMA camps and all that sort of thing. It seems like people who are worried about the FEMA camps and worried about the being sent off to some gulag or whatever don't seem to get that the federal system as it is now is so broken that the form of leadership that would be required to pull off such a feat just isn't there. I mean, you have guys like James Comey, who's the present head of the FBI, who it seems like he can barely tie his own shoes, And you have all these guys who are Secretary of Defense and people who are head of intelligence who seem so inept and so low IQ, oddly enough, that there's no way that they could ever be so strong and so powerful as to suppress us all in such a spectacular manner. And it helps too that the people are being very much empowered by technology, which we create ourselves. It's not through the help of any federal system or not through the help of any military protection that we have the rights which we're afforded. It's because we just have them. We have the rights we have because we have the rights we have. They're granted to us from a much higher power than any federal system ever could hope to be. We seem to have fallen into the classic trap, I think, it's seeming, of believing that the state gives you your rights. And that's entirely actually the opposite of what happens, where the state is actually more likely to take away or at least attempt to cease to recognize your rights than they are to grant them to you. You see, the classic pitfall, I think, that keeps happening with a lot of different people who are otherwise very good debaters for the topic of liberty. Otherwise, they're very good in defending the idea of personal liberty and personal freedom, is they have this strange idea that somehow your rights are given to you by the state, or because some guy did something at some point, you now have the Second Amendment right, or because some senator passed a bill, now you have the right to say whatever you want. And that's entirely untrue. That's actually not at all how it works. It's actually made quite clear in the Constitution that you don't have these rights because they say you have them. You have these rights because you've always had them, and the Constitution just recognizes them on a federal level. It's not that the Constitution gives you the right to say what you want to say. It's not that the Constitution gives you the right to critique the government or that they could pass some law which would take away your right to do so. It doesn't work that way. If rights were granted to you by the state, then rights would be a very fickle thing and really worth not much of anything. If your right could just be granted to you or taken away from you by just some committee, then they really aren't worth a whole lot then, are you? If they're a man-made construct, then they're not really worth a whole lot. It's so much more than that, though. Rights aren't just a construct which the founding fathers decided that you have. It doesn't work that way. It's rather that the founding fathers, when they wrote the Constitution, decided that the federal government will recognize these rights which you already have and will further deny the government powers to suppress those rights. That's where that's the big point there, is that they can't take away your rights. It does not work that way. They can attempt to suppress your rights. They can cease to recognize your rights, but they don't give you your rights and thus can't take away your rights. It doesn't work that way. So many people are so duped, I think, into believing that your rights are granted to you by the state. And because of the founding fathers, we now have the First Amendment right to do such. It doesn't work that way. You have the right to free speech no matter what. You have the right to the Second Amendment, freedom to defend yourself in any manner you choose, just because you do. That's a right that's been granted to you. Use the tools at hand in order to defend yourself. That's a right which you have. despite what the state might tell you. Oh, you can't have a weapon of this type because it's too dangerous. Oh, you can't have a weapon of this type because think of the children. They're not taking away your rights. They're simply ceasing to recognize your right. You still have it. It's just that they're ceasing to recognize it. And that's exactly what's going on here with the Stingray devices, where you have a right to privacy, and yet the feds and the local police departments and the state police departments and the federal what do you call them, the federal marshals and the Texas Rangers, all these different institutions are simply ceasing to recognize your right to privacy. You still have that despite it being violated. It's kind of like you have a right to defend your home even though a burglar broke in. You still have that right, as your home is your castle, shall we say. You have the right to not have your house being broken into, despite somebody breaking into it. You see what I'm saying? You still have that right, despite the fact that it's just been violated. So our rights are violated all the time by state institutions. That doesn't mean that they go away. And I say, oh man, they've regulated a certain type of ammunition. Now I don't have the right to own it. They can't take away your right to own things. It doesn't work that way. You always have the right to do these things which have been your right to do for forever. Now, is that to say that you should go around breaking the law because you have a right to own firearms, you have a right to bear arms, and you should go out and illegally buy a machine gun? No, obviously obviously getting in trouble with the law is not the right thing to do. However, if we're talking about, as far as legality goes, if we're talking about you getting a license to buy the proper type of weaponry, is that wrong? No, absolutely not. And if for some odd reason the government ceases to recognize your right to own weapons, are they wrong in doing so? Absolutely. Would you be outside of your rights in owning a weapon? No. See, that's where the difference is. They don't cease to grant you rights. Your rights are not granted to you by the state. And that's a big point that needs to be made more often. And it seems to me that a lot of neocons are kind of afraid to make that point because they're afraid that you'll cease to have faith in the federal government or the federal system. Because neocons, despite some arguments in their favor, they're still very much statists. And I'm not a statist at all. I don't like states, period. States are a hindrance in a lot of different ways. I'm not a nationalist by any means. I don't like the idea of borders. So you can see where I have a problem with a lot of neocon arguments where they say, we need more regulation on this or that to keep this or that from happening. And my solution is actually just deregulate things. Even a lot of neocons are saying we need to outlaw weed because people on weed are a danger to such and such. Listen, people are on weed already. People smoke weed all the time, despite the federal regulations against it. And we're not really seeing a huge amount of problems with pot smokers going around in state parks and murdering people and pot smoking serial killers and that sort of thing who are motivated by their need for marijuana. We're not seeing that. So would a deregulation of the plant, which naturally occurs, suddenly cause all these people to become murderous and violent? No. Actually, it would destabilize the drug cartels because they're already upset that Colorado's legalized it. So really legalizing it would hurt the drug cartels much more than funding them does, which is what we do already. But anyway, so it's quite a big problem that so many people put so much faith in the state so as to believe that your rights are granted by the state, which is actually the opposite of what happens because states will inevitably try to cease to recognize your rights. It's a decline. It's a natural decline that always happens with the founding of any state. Immediately, they will try to infringe on your rights. It always happens. There's no way around it. As soon as, even just very soon after the founding of the United States of America, so many different things went wrong. Think about even just as recently as the 1910s, the Federal Reserve Act. Think about the 1960s and 1950s, and taking off the gold standard. All these different things that took away, supposedly took away some of our rights or ceased to recognize some of our rights, where states are always in a state of decline. There's no way around it. States are always in a state of decline. From inception to death, they are always in a state of decline. States are kind of like living people when you think about it, where as soon as I'm born, I'm dying. That's just how it is. Right now, I'm in a slow process of dying. And that's just the way of it. Same thing goes for states. Eventually, they will die. They will collapse because they become weak. And in their weakness, they attempt to appear stronger than they really are. And that's exactly what's happening here. Well, power to the people is what I say. And the people's will shall be heard. And one way in which the people's will is being heard is with a new device that is allowing you to captures Stingray device signals in order to determine whether or not you are actually getting spied on by the police. Now, the police, I'm sure, are very upset about this device, and I think that's a good thing. See, this machine catches stingrays is the headline on Ars Technica. It's called the Pony Express, and it's demoing cellular threat detectors, threats to your right to communication, because you do have a right to associate. You can talk to whoever you want to without that being implication in some committing of some crime. And the police aren't really a fan of that.
This is a modern world. This is the modern world. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducts. Call now.
NASCAR, Laura Ingram, Dennis Miller, David Toulis, Coast to Coast AM, and CBS Radio News. Chattanooga's news, talk, and sports leader.
Hot News Talk Radio, 910, 1190, and 1240 AM.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. After months of delay, the Senate closer to a vote on the president's attorney general nominee, Loretta Lynch.
Republicans and Democrats have struck a deal on a human trafficking bill held up in a dispute over abortion funding. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said as soon as they pass it,
we'll move to the president's nominee for attorney general, hopefully in the next day or so.
Senate Democratic Leader Harry Reid says the compromise shows
good things can happen.
Lynch was nominated in November.
Fox Radio's Rachel Sutherland. Bluebell Creamery's recalling all of its products on the market on listeria worries, and a Fresno, California police cadet is reportedly in stable condition after being shot by another cadet cleaning a gun Monday.
As they were manipulating the handgun, one of the rounds accidentally discharged.
Fresno Police Chief Jerry Dyer says while the incident appears to be accidental, an investigation is underway. Fox News, we report.
They say you can always tell a Texan, you just can't tell them much. But you can try. Cowboy Up with Texas on Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 Eastern, and he comments on the day's events. So, agree or disagree, call in and tell a Texan.
Hot News Talk 1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
We are now in a technological arms race of sorts. Not in the way that you might think, where it's arms race where, ooh, the Russians are getting nukes and so we need to get bigger nukes. Or, oh, look, the Iranians are getting a nuclear deal, so we need to make sure that there's always inspections every other day and that sort of thing. Not that sort of arms race. No, actually an arms race where it's not one government versus another government, or actually maybe it is. Come to think of it, perhaps it is actually a form of government against another form of government. It's national government against personal government. Two governments are clashing. And the solution isn't really violence, because violence, while there are arguments for and against it, some are quite good, some are ridiculous. Violence is not my preferred method of getting a point across. The best way to get a point across is to simply live out that point, where I say, well, look, this system works, and I can prove it because I'm living it right now. Well, technology is helping us along quite a lot in getting independence, gaining independence from the system, gaining independence from the state, where we are less dependent on national government and much more dependent on personal government, where I say that, you know, I can govern myself, or the church can govern me in this regard, and I feel no need for protection from the state. And I say, no, thank you. I don't want an officer to come out to my house if my neighbor calls and says, I think there might have been a shooting, because I can protect myself just fine. And it's that idea that's very threatening to the state idea, where they say you need us. And quite often it turns out that we don't actually. It's a very threatening idea to them. And it's such a non-violent, non-threatening idea to regular old people who say, I do not need the state. But the state gets all up in arms and gets afraid because their very existence relies on you needing them. Well, this machine is one step in the right direction for gaining independence and gaining potentially awareness of what's going on in your surroundings. There's a whole layer of things going on that we can't even see because it's not in the visual spectrum. What I'm talking about is radio waves, how you're listening to me right now. Now, radio waves are used in a myriad of different ways. In fact, some of them are ones that you don't even think about. One, for example, is your cell phone. Your cell phone operates off of radio waves. It's called GSM. Now, that signal is sent out from a cell tower to your phone and from your phone to the cell tower in order to make phone calls and to receive SMSs and to get mobile data, all sorts of different things that you use your phone for. Of course, you can use Wi-Fi as well, but guess what? That's also a wireless signal operating off of the 5 gigahertz band or 3.2, depending on which band you're using. But still, nonetheless, you're using radio waves probably right now in order to communicate with your computer, in order for your phone to communicate with other phones, in order for your radio to pick up my voice right now, you're using radio. A lot of people don't get that radio is much, much more important than perhaps we give it credit for, where radio waves are used for almost every form of modern communication at one level or another. Well, one way that this is in our favor is that you can't really keep them from us, if you know what I mean. What I'm saying is, the feds will use radio waves, and that's in our favor because radio waves can be easily picked up. And now they might be scrambled in some way or another, but we can determine what they are based on signal strength and based on a lot of other factors. So at the RSA conference in San Francisco today, the network penetration testing and monitoring tool company called Pony Express will demonstrate its newest creation, a sensor that detects rogue cellular network transceivers, including Stingray devices, and other hardware used by law enforcement to surreptitiously monitor and track cell phones and users. Now, unless there's a warrant out for your arrest or a warrant out for, a search warrant for your phone, then the police should not be monitoring you. It's as simple as that. Unless there's a search warrant against you, and specifically against your cell phone, you do not have to have any sort of monitoring done against you. In fact, it shouldn't be done because it's actually illegal at that point. So you're perfectly within your rights, obviously, to detect these signals because you're really not doing anything other than passively picking up radio waves, which are all over the place at every point in time. They're even out in space. Radio waves are being constantly blasted out by the sun and different quasars and all sorts of different things. There's always radio waves everywhere. Even before the first radio was invented, by Nikola Tesla or Marconi, whoever you want to listen to, whenever the first radio was invented, there were still radio waves being broadcasted all over the place because they come from space. Now, they're not like alien communications or anything like that. It's just that there are signals being broadcasted by different stars, which happen to fall on the same frequency as what we commonly use now today, certain cycles. Well, anyway, in exclusive demonstration for Ars Technica, Pony Express CTO Dave Porcello and Director of Research and Development Rick Farina showed off the company's new cell network threat detection capabilities, which integrate into Pony's Pulse Security and Auditing Service. The capability will give companies the ability to monitor cellular networks around them and detect anomalies caused by rogue cellular-based stations, IMSI catchers, and devices used to extend cellular coverage into areas where it may not be actually authorized. So, of all the potential security threats to companies and individuals that have emerged over the past few years, perhaps the hardest to crack is rogue cellular base stations, whether they're used to attack the privacy of a cell phone user's communications or as a backdoor out of places where cell phone usage is restricted. Configuring unauthorized cell towers has become increasingly simple. And it doesn't necessarily even require law enforcement grade hardware. Anyone with a HackRF card or any other software-defined radio kit, that's SDR, and open source software can actually turn a laptop computer into a cell network transceiver or even a cell jammer if they want to. It's not hard. You can actually pick up the encrypted cell phone signals if you have one of these web SDR devices. It's not hard. Now, the devices are kind of expensive. They're on the $400 or so scheme or scale, depending on which one you're going to buy. You can actually make one out of a USB, USB TV tuner. But, it's not going to have a huge amount of range. But anyway, it's not like it's impossible to pick up these different signals. It's actually really easy with just a few $100s. And really, that's not a whole lot to people who are going to set their mind to it. So the real thing that scares people the most is that we have no visibility into these things. It's not like you can look out the window and see, oh, there's a giant van with a satellite dish on top that's pointing right at my house, so I know they're spying on my cell phone. It doesn't work that way. It's very clandestine. It's very hard to detect, actually. It could be some guy wearing a backpack that picks up these devices. I mean, it's really not very high power. It's very easy to pick up cell phone signals because it's just radio waves. It's not like it's some specialized thing you need to pick up these signals. It's just radio waves. So that's what scares people the most, is that you can't actually see the thing. Nobody knows how many of them are out there, but they definitely are out there. Last September, ESD America, which manufactures cryptophone secure cell phones, reported that more than a dozen rogue cell, quote, towers have been discovered in Washington, D.C. It's not clear if all of these were being operated by law enforcement, but they are there nonetheless. And that's sort of another point, is that it doesn't really matter who's running them. It could be some Russian hacker, if you want to go for that, or it could be a FBI agent with a vendetta against you. It doesn't really matter. The point is that these devices are being used against you. So it's really almost irrelevant who's using them. The fact of the matter is that they're being used against you. So regardless of who's using them, you should protect yourself. So way back in 2010, at the Washington, D.C. ShmooCon security conference, Chris Paget, now known as Kristen Paget, gender change, demonstrated that he could capture the cell phone data of attendees using a rig that cost only about $1,500. That's not a whole lot of money. $1,500 is not a lot to some people. He just bought a commodity software-defined radio card and loaded OpenBTS, which is an open-source GSM cellular base station software package, onto his laptop. It's that easy. He made a point of using a very small antenna so that he only hijacked about half of the audience in the auditorium. I'm sure that this sort of thing was being done before that, but I think this is the first public demonstration. But you see how easy it is. If he used a laptop and just a small card, all that really needs to be done is put your laptop in your backpack, plug in that card, have it scanning, and walk around the mall. It's not hard. So it's a tool like any other tool. It's not like this device in and of itself is evil or bad or wrong to use. It's how you use it. A tool is not wrong. A tool has really no moral implication. It's how it's used. For instance, I could own a AR-15. I could actually go out and buy one right now. I'm old enough to. And that would not be a wrong thing. It's just a tool. I'm not a mass murderer. I have no interest in ever harming anyone with any implement ever. It's just a tool for protection and for pleasure too. I like target shooting. It's a lot of fun. So I have no intention of ever harming anybody. Somebody with murderous intentions could go and buy that same gun and shoot up a school. Now, there's not any form of regulation that's going to stop that because he could just as easily buy that weapon on the black market. It's easy. It's really not hard at all. But you see what I'm saying? It's just a tool. The implication lies in the person, not in the tool. It's just the same as, say, nuclear technology, where we're using it to generate power for so many people who otherwise would have no electricity, but it can also be used to blow up cities. So you see what I'm talking about? It's just a tool with no moral implication in and of itself as a tool. Well, same goes for these IMSI sniffers, where in and of itself, this is not a wrong thing. It can be used for research purposes and can actually do quite a lot of good. But in the wrong hands, it can be used to violate quite a lot of people's rights all at the same time with potentially no detection whatsoever. So at the same time, law enforcement use of such systems has grown. Using the same principles as malicious cellular base stations, authorities could capture cell phones' International Mobile Subscriber Identity, or IMSI, as a way to identify a targeted phone and execute a man-in-the-middle attack against it, acting as an intermediary between the phone and a legitimate cell tower in order to intercept and record conversations. These devices, called IMSI catchers or Stingrays, have been controversially used by law enforcement across the U.S., often under non-disclosure agreements, which is the idea that the Harris Corporation, in this instance, makes the law enforcement agency sign a non-disclosure agreement, meaning that if there's ever a trial, they actually drop the case so they don't have to disclose that these devices have been used. So it's a very high level of corruption that's going on here, but really, it's just to be expected. It's not like this comes as some huge surprise that the police are abusing power. It's the very nature of the system that has been set up. Well, another threat faced by companies in highly regulated industries is the unauthorized use of microcells or femtocells, which are small base stations often sold by cell carriers to extend cell networks in places where towers might not have coverage. I'll give you an example. Erlanger Hospital, cell phone coverage down in Erlanger is horrible. Cell coverage is almost non-existent in some areas of Erlanger. So the CEO or the board of Erlanger could decide that, we need to buy some of these femtocells so that we can extend cell phone coverage into some of the concrete hallways and stairwells in Erlanger Hospital. So they could do that, and that would be good and fine, so long as the carriers are fine with it. But again, those femtocells could instead be used to spy on cell phones, which are being used at the same place. So you see how the implication is. So if a company is trying to prevent personal cell phone usage within a facility through passive means, for example, an employee might plug in a femto base station in their desk to make outbound calls that aren't through the company's call logging system. This also introduces a potential threat of cell jamming by someone seeking to block service for malicious reasons. People may have a misconception about how jamming works. Some may say that, jamming is a very complicated process. It's very difficult to pull off. It's actually not. So long as you can broadcast on the same signal as the signal you're trying to jam, all you have to do is just blast white noise on the same frequency, and the cell phones won't be able to do anything. They won't be able to communicate with their base station because they'll just be picking up the white noise, and vice versa. The cell phone will be picking up the white noise that you're trying to you're putting out. So no cell phones will be able to communicate. It's not a difficult process. Again, it only costs about $1,500, so it's not hard to do. It's astoundingly easy. Now, this has great implications for us. How? Well, this has great implications for us because now it means that we can potentially discover who is spying on our cell phones, or rather, when our cell phones are being spied on. These new devices, which are being pushed out, can detect any spike in cell phone strength, which is indicative of a booster device being used or a cell site simulator in between device being used. So then we can detect when our phones are being spied on. This has great implications for those of us who value privacy quite highly, and it's great implications for those of us who want to be aware of when these devices are being used and where. Now, this has implications for the police as well, where they're going to be a little bit upset that we know that they're doing what they're doing, because after all, it's a giant threat to national security. If you know what police are doing, then criminals might know what they're doing and might be able to evade them more effectively. So it's a huge threat to national security, and anyone who owns these devices should be treated as a criminal and yada, yada. Well, that may be the case, but it does allow you to spy on them, potentially. It does allow you to know when they're detecting our cell phone signals. The point of the matter is, it's very hard to regulate these things because cell phone signals are just that, they're radio signals. It's not like they're hard to get. They're all over the place. So a device that can pick these things up is actually right in your pocket right now. I'm holding one right now. It's called a cell phone. You can modify a cell phone to pick up other cell phone signals. So the idea of this is not revolutionary. It's not difficult. It's not something that is really hard to do even. It's just a matter of getting the device and finding out how to use it and when to use it, where to use it, all that sort of thing. So this could, on the one hand, revolutionize our idea of privacy in being able to detect when we're being detected, but it could also potentially make us even less private. So it's sort of a trade-off maybe. But in the right hands, these devices could open up quite a few doors to discover what the police are doing with these cell site simulators. Well, the RIAA is back on the warpath of anti-piracy, where they think that if you download a music through non-approved means, you are simply the worst person ever and should be thrown in jail for a very long time or fined for much more than the song you downloaded is actually worth. Well, the RIAA is back on the anti-piracy warpath, according to ours, and it's suing song linking site MP3 Skull. So there's a new public enemy number one for U.S. record labels when it comes to online privacy. It's a website called MP3 Skull. So the MP3 Skull site, which was sued for copyright infringement by the major U.S. record labels on Friday, is a no-frills listing of hit songs available for download just within a few clicks. The site hosts no content. Instead, it links to MP3 music files, which are available on other sites. So, for instance, its current top hit is See You Again by Wiz Khalifa, and links to the files hosted on sites like mp3lite.net, freemp3.se, trendingmp3.com, whatever. It's not that these songs are being provided by MP3 Skull, it's that they're showing you where it's being provided. So instead of going after the actual providers, they've instead gone after MP3 Skull, which doesn't really make any sense. The site also includes a copyright page, which has a series of bizarre disclaimers, including one that says, all music on is presented only for fact-finding listening. Another suggests that users must remove songs from their computer after they listen to it, which is a bogus attempt at saying that it's legal so long as you delete it after 24 hours, which is not at all the case. I don't know where that idea comes from. Well, the record label's lawsuit was filed in the Southern District of Florida, where the site's web hosting service Webzilla is based. The record labels admit that they don't actually know where the site's owners are based, and their investigation points to Russia, but that's far from certain. The complaint describes how during two brief periods in December of 2010 and October 2013, MP3 Skull's domain registration was available to the public. At that time, the registration indicated that the site's owner was Monica Vasilenko, who lived in the Russian city of Petrozavodsk, and Vasilenko and Does 1 through 10 are being sued as operators of the site. But the funny thing about that is music piracy, oddly enough, actually kind of makes the labels money in a sense, because people who pirate music and people who pirate movies are actually more likely to buy music and movies. Isn't that weird? For instance, I know a guy who pirates all day and all night, and yet he buys more records than anybody I know. Isn't that weird? And he buys them like from Amazon. It's not like he goes to secondhand stores or anything like that. He goes to stores like, For the Record and buys them. But he pirates more music than anybody I know. He has terabyte upon terabyte of pirated music. But he goes and buys almost everything he pirates. It's weird. But same goes for movies, where people will download movie after movie, but then they'll still go and see movies in the theater. It's kind of weird how that works. But really, the music industry and the movie industry actually aren't harmed a whole lot by movie and music piracy. It's just that they aren't making as much money as they could make, so they're getting all upset. And of course, they have the feds to help them out, even though arguably movie and music piracy isn't actually illegal. So it's sort of a rough patch, but that's your update on music and movie piracy news, I suppose. So Comcast could actually abandon the Time Warner Cable merger if the government starts to impose tough conditions. So Comcast and Time Warner Cable officials are scheduled to meet with the Department of Justice antitrust officials on Wednesday to discuss potential remedies in hopes of keeping their $45.2 billion merger on track, says the Wall Street Journal yesterday. The Department of Justice antitrust lawyers are reportedly close to recommending that the government block the deal. Comcast might be able to save the merger by agreeing to conditions, but the cable company could also walk away from the deal if the government asks for conditions to which it objects. When announcing the merger in February of 2014, Comcast said that the acquisition agreement did not include a breakup fee, noting that the lack of one reflected its confidence that the deal might be approved. With the government's merger review now having taken months longer than was expected, the absence of a breakup fee would let Comcast abandon the merger without having to compensate Time Warner Cable. Back in 2011, AT&T had to pay $3 billion to T-Mobile and then transfer the spectrum to the company after the DOJ and FCC sunk a proposed merger between the two companies. So the feds are getting quite in the way of business here, with Time Warner and Comcast seemingly wanting to merge, but the feds are worried about antitrust. So the journal sources flagged a possible net neutrality requirement as one that could cause Comcast to abandon the Time Warner Cable deal. The FCC issued new net neutrality rules for internet providers this year. A merger condition could require Comcast to follow the rules, even if they are later blocked in court. Comcast agreed to a similar condition based on an earlier version of net neutrality rules when it bought NBC Universal back in 2011. However, the new rules are stricter than the previous ones and include a reclassification of broadband as a common carrier service, which brings heavier regulation than broadband's previous classification as an information service. So now it's a utility rather than an information service. Some may say that this is a good thing and that it actually is a utility, and some will say that this is a bad thing and it is in fact an information service. I say, why are we even classifying it? What do they care? It's a system for communication, sure, but why does the government really have anything to say about that? Because that implies that they somehow have jurisdiction over this international entity, which they really don't. That's sort of the big problem with FCC net neutrality rules, is that they're claiming jurisdiction over something which is totally an international, countryless, nationalityless entity, which has nothing at all to do with the United States government, other than maybe they funded some research that created the initial project that led to the creation of the internet. The World Wide Web, as it stands today, is in no way a product of the United States government. It's not even close to being owned by the United States government. Yeah, they own some .gov sites that nobody goes to, but just because the government owns national parks, does that now mean that they have jurisdiction over your backyard? Well, actually, they would argue they do. I would say they don't. So it's two entirely different worldviews at play, where the federal government claims that, or at least will not stop you from thinking that you get all of your rights from them. Thus, you being able to use the internet is thanks to them and their protection of your freedoms or whatever, where that's actually not at all the case. Your rights don't come from any federal institution. They come from a much higher power than that. And you being able to browse the internet is thanks to companies and users coming together to create a network for sharing of information, not thanks to the FCC saying that you can do it. It doesn't really work that way. The internet is not available to you by permission. The internet is available to you because you pay for a subscription to gain access to it. It's sort of a commonly owned thing at this point. It's not a institution which the government could come in and say, oh, well, you didn't build that, I suppose. So we're going to say that, this company has to do this and that company has to do that. How are they going to enforce these net neutrality rules for a foreign company like Alibaba? I'm not sure how that's supposed to work. They're implying that the FCC has jurisdiction over an entirely international entity. Just like the Coast Guard can't go out and govern what goes on in the Bahamas, neither can the FCC come in and determine what goes on in the internet. It just doesn't work that way, and it's bound to fail. That's all there is to it.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
You
You do not have to be living with constant pain. You need to make the choice today to enjoy a revitalized body. You deserve to live a better pain-free life. And Dr. Ross can help. At Ross Chiropractic, failure is not an option. For over 40 years, Dr. Ross, a graduate of the prestigious Palmer College of Chiropractic, prided himself in helping and healing. The Ross method of chiropractic care is unique in developing a treatment designed just for you. And Ross Chiropractic makes this promise to you. If he believes that he can help relieve your